Today's program is part of a special series brought to you by St. Agnes Medical Center and Every Neighborhood Partnership, with funding provided by ACEs Aware. Together, we are working to raise awareness about the effects of adverse childhood experiences in hopes of building a healthier community and a brighter future for our children. Dr. B explains the importance of acknowledging our stressors of the past in order to thrive in the present. Plus, she shares practical tips for coping through challenging times and building greater resiliency so you and your family can enjoy healthier and more fulfilling life.
Hi, you're listening to Delusional Optimism with Dr. B,
where we explore human resiliency
and learn how people thrive even after adversity.
We break down the complexities of the human brain so concepts are simple and relatable.
It's fun and empowering to understand how your earliest experiences
influence your relationships today.
What makes you tick?
Dr. B is a speaker, trainer, and consultant who understands emotions and human development from the inside out.
Let's dive into today's episode.
Here's Dr. B.
Hey everyone, it's Seth Creekmore, co-host here on Delusional Optimism. This is the second part of our Q&A episodes. If you haven't listened to the first one, make sure to head on over there and listen to it. It was a phenomenal conversation. Dr. B brought some really great information and wisdom, so make sure to check out that first part. The second part is going to be equally as great. I thoroughly enjoyed being a part of it. So, as always, if you're interested in furthering this conversation, feel free to reach out to Dr. B at contact@drbconnections.com. Or if you'd like to know more about her, you can visit her website at drbconnections.com. Let's get into the episode. So switching streams just a little bit, we have a question from Kevin Smith, and it reads, is there a disparity between white and ethnic populations regarding ACEs scores?
We know from researching different high-risk populations or marginalized communities that they are impacted with more adverse childhood experiences because of systemic racism or discrimination against their particular group, which then limits their access to the resources that we have in our world and community. So that's how I want to answer that in terms of, I don't want to say that, oh, because you're part of one ethnic group or because you're part of the LGBT community, you're more messed up. You know, that would be wrong. That would be completely wrong to say, imply, and it's just flat out not true. However, there is disparity in different marginalized communities and communities that are discriminated against systemically because of the lack of access and the inability to be included and to get resources. So we have to really pay attention to that and become aware of our own gender, ethnic, racial, LGBTQ biases that are so implicit in us. Some of them are highly explicit. We've been seeing that. Like, there's no joke about it. Like, you know, that's a thing. Yeah. But there's also implicit bias, and so we have to make sure that we're digging deep and honestly about that, and not be afraid that if somebody gets something that we already have, it doesn't minimize what we already have. It's just giving them something they don't have. So that's really important. People always feel like if we give something to a particular group, that it's taking something from us, or quote, our group. That's not true. You can give something to another group and it just includes them in that resource. It doesn't take anything from anybody else.
It's very much a scarcity mindset.
Scarcity mindset, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Very much so.
What I'm saying is that it's not a racial difference. It's a disparity difference. It's a difference in access. So if a community has less access, higher poverty, more gun violence, and it happens to be in a neighborhood that's predominantly African American, then it's going to look like, oh, African Americans have higher ACE scores. Okay, yes, maybe they do. Why is that? Because they're an oppressed community, not because it's not an implicit part of the African American community. It's about the oppression put onto the community. And that is the same thing is true for other marginalized communities. I just chose that as an example, but the LGBT community as well, or migrant farm workers or immigration families who are first generation citizens, or and there are way smarter people than me to talk to the point of racial disparity and differences. So I mean, I understand the topic, but I'm certainly not the expert in all the details of those differences. But I do know that when they get pulled apart, that it comes down to access and inclusion and resources.
All right, our next question comes from Barry.
Hey, Dr. B. This is Barry. I'm a drug treatment counselor at a federal prison, and my question is, does trauma in early childhood cause resistance towards authority figures?
Yeah, great question, Barry. Does trauma in early childhood cause resistance towards authority? That's absolutely possible and a consequence of early childhood trauma. If you think about the experience in early childhood, if abuse is asserted on a child, an authority figure, then internally we're going to say to ourselves, I hate authority. I don't like authority. Authority is bad. And whether that goes, the younger the child, the less conscious that messaging is. So if it's deeper and it's not in our rational mind, it's in our unconscious mind or our feeling body mind, then we have this unknown, unidentified resistance to authority because of that experience, and it carries over into every authority relationship we have in our lives, and especially in a prison system where, guess what? It's just almost like a repetition of the parent-child relationship that was potentially abusive.
Yeah.
So there's we also call those ghosts from childhood or ghosts from the past. So where the relationship trauma in childhood gets carried over and perpetuated in all future relationships, especially the ones that are similar. So that's a ghost. And we need to recognize where our ghosts are and come to terms with our ghosts. So we don't carry them into all of our other relationships. There's a saying about your earliest relationships will set the stage for all future relationships. If you have a loving early childhood relationship, likely you'll be able to carry that over into your adult relationships. If you have an abusive, chaotic, completely violent or scary, depressing early childhood, guess what? You're going to attract that and you're going to live that out in your adult relationships until you have an opportunity to heal. So there's an episode called Don't Feed Into the Trauma Cycle, and it's about intergenerational trauma, where we talk about ghosts versus remnants from the past. And the difference between the two are that ghosts from early childhood really are about relationship conflicts that we had in early childhood, and then we carry those conflicts over into later relationships. Those are ghosts. We're repeating those past relationship conflicts into a different relationship where it doesn't necessarily need to be. Yeah. Now, a remnant trauma is where somebody actually experiences a traumatic event, a terrifying, terrorizing event, and that fear gets carried over, that becomes part of who we are. And that's a remnant of the past. It's like carrying a piece of the past with you as an experience that you had versus carrying with you sort of a message you got, but you keep reciting the message in every single situation, whether it applies or not.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work in every relationship. So that's where we have a lot of room to work with those ghosts and rewriting our story and our narrative.
And relating it back to the relationship with authorities. I mean, I'm sure it's not just inmates that have difficult time with authorities. I was reading a book the other day, and he was saying something along the lines of, "We talk about our government, but we wish we could say to our parents."
Yeah.
Like we just put all of our parental trauma onto government or another authority, a church leader or whatever, and when it's really something much closer to home. Much closer.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And if we think about it like that, we react to the government as if they're our parent, and yet as full-blown grown-up adults, we are the government. We get to decide. So really, if we stop and think about it, and we took responsibility and take responsibility for our full adulthood. So when we find ourselves shouting at the government or shouting at somebody who is an authority figure, sometimes it's relevant. I'm not saying that there are not times where it is absolutely appropriate to say, whoa, you are completely out of line. However, if you find yourself shouting like a teenager at the TV or a teenager at the, whoever, authority figure, and you might wonder, maybe this is a ghost from the past that I need to revisit and then own my adulthood around. How do I feel about it? And what do I really want my message to be? Because this message sounds like a teenager.
Right. And both of those things can be equally true at the same time. It can both be a just, wonderful, loving response, even if it's coming across as aggressive and angry. But there's also there's that tiny child inside of you that's just like responding out of fear and trying to get something that we think we don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Responding out of fear is such a common way of being. And having done my Enneagram kind of on a little micro level and knowing that I'm a fear-driven 7, I always think my initial thought to everything is good, bad, totally neutral, fear. So then I have to say, oh, wait, okay, you're okay. Like, you're safe, you're fine. Yep. Now what do I want to do? Now what do I want to do with this information? Good, bad, or neutral? But knowing that about myself, that I am driven at some level by fear, and we've talked about the fear and excited, I call it anxiety. You call it Terracided.
Yes.
So excited versus anxiety combined, or terrified versus excited. They live in the same part of the brain. They're best friends. They hang out all the time. So you got to go, oh yeah, that was so great. I'm scared. It just is a thing. And knowing that literally gives us permission to be real about it. And then to say to somebody that loves us or that we love, I'm feeling so excited and I am so scared. Can you just hold me? Or can you just sit with me? And, then we can learn how to ask for what we need when we're in a situation that brings out our fear, even when it's a good fear. Because those of us who are driven like that I'm learning even more about, is that it's just our go-to. Right. And it's not going to change. That's not going to change. So I just have to learn how to own it and ride that wave instead of push back against it.
Yeah. So, learning that emotion needs to be in the back seat instead of in the driver's seat. It can tell you about different things, can inform you on a lot of different levels, but if it has control of the steering wheel, it's just not going to go well.
No.
If I can bring Enneagram into this, just a tad, but it's not like only 3 numbers experience just fear, or 3 numbers only experience anger or sadness. It's oftentimes the emotion that we are most familiar with, we will convert. Like anger is an uncomfortable emotion for a lot of people. And so it'll often get converted into sadness or into fear, yes, or joy on some level, like happiness. And you obviously have enough self-awareness and tools to be like, to just pause, to give it a second, to like, what's underneath the thing, underneath the thing, underneath the thing, underneath the thing. And that's when we can actually get to something that is a little bit more grounded in our adult self instead of our child self. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's so good. And I often say too, mad and sad are best friends.
Yes.
when you jump out at somebody because you're so mad, it probably, when you go on to pause, it's like, oh my gosh, my feelings were so hurt and I'm actually sad.
Yeah.
It's not like they don't live in isolation. They live together. And so we have that, and then we go cry. And I think I saw this. I do a lot of stuff around micro emotions and, universal emotions. And so when you recognize there's 7 universal emotions, and I always struggle with identifying surprise. And it's so interesting because I don't like surprises. Why? They scare me. So it's this whole, I've done this whole thing with myself around, oh my goodness, I can see fear, I can see contempt, I can see happy, sad, mad. What's that one I'm missing? What's that one again? Well, the one that always is elusively out there is surprise.
Yeah.
And why is it always the one that I leave off the list? Because it feels scary to me.
Unpredictable.
And that's probably a ghost, And I'm sure it's a ghost. I don't really know exactly where that came from, but I don't like people to jump out and say boo like that. Some people think that's funny watching that on, America's Funniest Home Video. I just think it's wrong. I have big feelings about that.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of funny, but when you break your stuff down to that level, which one of those micro emotions is the one that's hardest for you to find? That's probably the one that you are, you have some ghosts around.
And I think that's so useful. Even how we engage our relationships, how we engage politics even is the thing that's just oh no, that's just wrong. It's there are things that are just wrong for sure.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's something to just be curious about and question, is that just my experience? Or is that something objectively horrific and something that needs to be changed?
Right. Yeah. Right. Because we live in the brain of confirmation bias. So all we've ever done in our whole lives is just suck up the things that confirm our own reality and what we want to be true. So in the grand scheme of things, we've all created our own little slushy world of I'm right. And the truth is that, when you have to force in the other facts, it kind of messes up our snow cone.
Yeah.
So
nobody likes a messy snow cone.
No. So, but naturally, in order to feel safe, we like to have confirmation. So we find it, we put it in its slot, and we close the door and we're okay, I'm done. That's good. I can live with that. And the same thing with uncertainty. We would rather have bad news or pain than just not know. Sitting in uncertainty is so hard for people. When you know that, then you can say, oh yeah, sometimes uncertainty is worth the wait. But our natural instinct is to say, no, I'd rather have you just punch me, get it over with, because then I know what's happening and it's over, and I have a slot for that in my brain.
Yeah.
Instead of, oh, you might come up and scare me and punch me. That would be horrible.
Yeah. How would you describe? So, like, I understand what you're saying about in that situation. I've had personal experiences, and I know people that have experiences where it almost is the opposite. Like, almost sometimes I'd rather just not know, because then it's some level of control. I can control as long as I don't know that they don't like me. Then I can still keep some level. It's not confirmed that I.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. It's denial.
Yeah, you can say that.
It's pretty much like the way we just say, oh yeah, I just don't want to know that. I'm not ready to know that. Even though all the bells and whistles are going off, the alarms are saying, yeah, you're right. That's right. You're like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure I'm not right. Like, nope.
Yeah.
You know, it's the until you're ready to actually deal with whatever the relationship is or the experience is, that our brain protects us in service of survival and allows us to be capable of denying what's right there, what's all spinning around in front of us.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden we say, oh my gosh, how did I ignore that for 5 years?
Right.
Well, I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I needed to not know. I didn't have
okay.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready. I wasn't in a place. I didn't have the resources. Whatever it is, it's all okay. I couldn't know until the time that I did know.
Yeah.
So
important. Okay, so our next question is from someone that I think you might be familiar with, Dr. B.
My name is Lisa, and I'm an advocate for children in foster care. And I'm wondering, what should foster parents or resource parents know about ACEs, especially around LGBTQ kids that are coming from group homes or other environments? But what would be a great thing for a foster family to know about ACEs?
Oh, that's a great question. And yes, I do recognize that voice because that's my wife. So,
yes.
And she is an advocate for court-appointed special advocate for foster youth in California. So she supports foster youth while they're in care. So she kind of is that main touch point, which is so important for kids when they're away from their families, regardless of why. What is important for foster families to know about ACEs, especially with the LGBTQ youth population or child population? Well, one is that if they're going to be a foster parent and take a child into their home, they need to be aware of their feelings around the LGBTQ community, period. Because right off the bat, if a child comes into their home who identifies as something other than heterosexual, then they need to be able to be a foster or a supportive parent to that child, a substitute parent for that child, while that child is in their care. I feel so strongly about this. We struggle with families taking in foster children with the idea that they're the family who's perfect to change them into something else. And that is not a thing.
That's
so
not advisable, no.
Not advisable and highly unkind. It's unkind because the messaging behind that says it doesn't matter who you are. It matters who I want you to be. And you don't matter because only what I think matters. And there's a woman named Dr. Love who wrote a book called We Want to Do More Than Survive, and it's actually about racial disparity and inequity. However, it's relevant to all situations like this, and she uses a word that I love it, but it's painful. It's called spirit murdering. And it's a powerful word, and it's this is a great book if, I want to plug this book. But spirit murdering is when you don't allow the spirit to live inside the child or the person and let them be who they are. You're murdering their spirit. Whether they live around you or not, they aren't living. And it really, when she said that word for the first time, I just kind of got tingles and thought, this is not okay. And it's not okay for anyone. And we need to be aware of our impact on other people's spirit or soul or emotional body, because actually that's more harmful in the long run than stabbing somebody with a knife or potentially even shooting them with a gun, in a non-deadly way, in the leg or something. Those kinds of wounds heal and they're visible and get addressed. The emotional wounds that people say, everything about you is wrong and bad because you love somebody who's the same gender, then gets wired in and makes people feel like they don't matter and they can't matter if they're their whole self. So I would say to foster parents, if you're going to be a foster parent, you got to do your work. That's the first thing. And secondly, the organizations and the systems that pay foster parents need to do their work because it's their job to be the overseers of substitute parents. And if they can't do that job, they should not be in that business.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and we all need to call that out because children, especially LGBTQ children, die of suicide at a rate that is not only skyrocketing right now, but it is so much higher than the general population of children. So this is a life and death issue. 8 out of 10 transgender youth will attempt or complete suicide in their adolescence. So that number is just beyond comprehensible. So
that is not okay.
No. And so if a child is pulled from a home because their family can't deal with their sexual orientation or gender identity, and then they get placed with a substitute family who is just a replication of that, how is that any different? We're better off leaving them with the family that has the relationship with them rather than putting them with a new family who has the same issues and don't have a relationship.
That's interesting.
It's dual trauma or multiple trauma.
Right.
So when you take a child from their parent, you are causing an adverse childhood experience. That is one ACE, period. So if you're going to do that, you damn well better have a good reason and know what you're doing.
Yeah. I just want to touch on something real quick. I've heard you talk about reverse engineering foster care. Can you speak a little bit on that and how that relates to ACEs?
We have a system of removing children from their families and placing them in foster or substitute care. And I think that systemically, we know that there's racism within the system and there's discrimination within the system. And so that causes children of minority groups and marginalized communities to be removed at a higher rate than white children. So that right in and of itself speaks to implicit and explicit bias. But when we reverse engineer foster care, and I love saying reverse engineering, so maybe that's why. But reverse
why? Wait. Is this just like a phonetic thing?
I don't know. I like saying.
I just like saying it.
Reverse engineering. It sounds so cool. It's like, let's just flip foster care on its head. And I kind of want to flip a lot of systems on their head and reverse engineer them backwards so they do what they're supposed to do rather than what they actually do. So as foster care stands, it instantly causes an ACE. So right off the bat, you're in an abusive family, you need to be removed. We're going to create an institutionalized adverse childhood experience of 1 by removing you from your family. It doesn't matter. You still love your family. Now you've got another ACE. Reverse engineering is if parents, back to intergenerational trauma, we just repeat cycles of trauma when we don't deal with them. So if instead of taking a child and putting them into a substitute family, we take a professional parenting parent, and give them the job of living with the family, with the children in the home, and we create foster parents who actually live with the whole family and work on the entire system and reorganize. I mean, this requires a higher level of training, experience, security even maybe. However, a lot of times when people act out violently towards children or others, it's because they're scared like a child. When we put an authority figure in a parent who's professional parent into that home, parents want to be stable with their children. Nobody wants their children to be okay more than their parent, even the abusive parent. So they abuse their children because it's what was done to them, and it's because they're so terrified that what they did will then happen to their children or who they became. So when we put an adult, we reverse engineer it. We throw the professional into the family and work on the family in the environment. Now we've taken that ACE off the table because we left the children with the relationships, and we're putting somebody in there to help rewire, at least untangle some of those complex problems that have been lived out generation after generation. And people, I think, are highly receptive to this. People would rather somebody come in and help them rather than have their children taken away.
Right.
So we need to really look at a lot of things from that backwards, reverse engineering model.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me on somewhat of a personal level of taking something out of context, or just taking it, getting rid of the problem instead of dealing with the problem.
Yes.
And even just in our medical system of like, let's just cut it out. Versus like, okay, what's causing this whatever? Instead of dealing with your back pain, let's just give you pain meds.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The symptom versus the root cause.
Right.
So we that's absolutely, and it speaks so nicely to ACEs because the root causes are ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and there aren't. Just because the screening has 10, there's actually lots and lots and lots of things that fall into those categories that are traumatic, that can fall into the definition of trauma, that lead to the symptoms of pain, anxiety, depression, risky behavior that ends up in a car accident or jump off a, ramp on a bike and get a concussion, or all kinds of things that happen. So yeah, if we're willing to take the time, it comes down. We are a fast moving country. We need to slow it down. And maybe this is one of the gems of COVID is that it's telling us, hey, your warp speed is over. You need to slow down. Spend some more time with your kids, because at first you hated it, but now you kind of like it, and you don't want to go back to work because you're going to miss your kids because you found out how kind of cool they are.
Yeah.
And you get more work done. And, all these weird little things that have happened as a result of COVID that we at first panicked about. And now we're kind of like, oh, you know what? I want to keep that change. Sure. I miss my people. I miss going to work. I miss doing certain things. But there are other things that we're learning because we've had an opportunity to settle down and slow down and feel about them.
Right. Before it got super cold up here in Indiana. I went on a bike ride with a friend, and we were talking about, 2020 has a lot of emotions attached to it, and how tempting it is. Like, it was in last year sometime, going into the new year, how much we just want to like run into the new year and just forget about 2020, right? And the analogy came into my head of, have you ever seen like the people that like put a parachute, like an athlete or something, on attached to them, and like they're running against the friction of the parachute? Yeah. And it's so, we constantly as a society are trying to clip that parachute off, but that parachute those are our emotions. That's our heart. And it's like, the harder you try to run away from it, the more drag it's going to create. And so, and it's so counterintuitive to be like, what if you took that parachute and you held it close?
I was just going to say, what if you just wrapped it around you? Yeah, exactly.
Then there's no more drag, but why would I hold the thing that's holding me back?
Yeah.
But that's the very thing that we have to do.
That's
and I feel
great.
Like that's what you're speaking to.
Yeah, that's a beautiful image in my mind as I see that, like, you know, as you pulling it forward and wrapping yourself in the thing that feels like it's dragging you down can really help you propel forward. Mm-hmm. You know, or at least not be held back.
Right.
Yeah. And so it makes you neutral. Yeah. Steady, balanced. Grounded, all the things that we're looking for. And awesome. And people are so, when I walk my dogs, there's a neighbor who has this like 2020 stinks and something else, and like like 4 or 5 different really negative words. And I think, okay, 2020 was definitely a hard year, but I feel like there have been a lot of insights that have come out of 2020, and a lot of gems. I mean, there are a lot of things that I can put on a list that have happened for me personally and people around me that I think, wow, that couldn't have happened had we not had COVID. This podcast would not exist had it. I literally started Facebook Live on the day we sheltered in place for the first time, March 15th, and did 71 episodes. And then that sort of like, you know, rolled into something else and then became the podcast. And so had we not been in COVID, I never even would have thought about, you need to help people with their emotions while they're stuck in their house, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So interesting.
So as we're kind of closing up here, what a phenomenal journey of questions. And thank you so much for bringing your knowledge and expertise. It's been wonderful. But I wonder, is there anything, everyone has consumed a lot of information at this point, and there's much more to learn. Can't wait for this new series coming up. What's one thing that you think those who are listening, whether they have ACEs or know someone that is experiencing ACEs, what's one very simple thing that they can do to comfort themselves and to take a step forward?
Oh, that's a great question. And I love this. This is my response to adverse childhood experiences are something that everybody has an experience with, whether it's themselves or somebody that they love. You are not going to get out of this life escaping adversity or adverse childhood experiences. However, you are not your ACE score. That's what I want to say. You are not your ACE score. You are just you, and I am just me, and everybody else is just them. And so we have to be very diligent about not saying, I'm Kristen, I have an ACE score of 5, and this is who I am, and so blah, blah, blah. We are our story of our lives, and we have to tell our story that incorporates and integrates all the parts of who we are and what we've experienced, and then we share that with the people that we love, and we learn their stories. And that's what makes a beautiful woven blanket that we don't hold back behind us, but we wrap up in and cuddle in and say, you know what? Yeah, some of those things were really hard, but guess what? look it, we're here. It's good. Like, life is good. We're taking breaths. We're
Yes.
we're still breathing. And there's so much inspiration in what people overcome than in what they suffer. People suffer a lot, but people also overcome a lot. So we have to give people the permission to not be their A score. You're allowed to be who you are, and it's not really your A score, because so many other things play into that. That's not that simple, even though we've kind of pared it down to that.
That is the deep wisdom of delusional optimism.
Yeah. Thank you.
That is.
Yeah.
Yes, very much
Yeah.
so. Dr. B, thank you so much.
Thank you, Seth. It's been great to have you as a co-host. I look forward to more time with you, and
Yes.
and everybody checking out Fathoms, because it's a great podcast, and I've
Awesome.
enjoyed listening to it. So, and learning about the Enneagram, it really is very compatible with a lot of trauma and resilience science. So
Yeah. We'll have to maybe do an episode on the Enneagram
Sure.
in the coming days for sure. That I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to that. So awesome.
right.
Well, talk
Okay.
to you later.
Okay, take care. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. If you're interested in booking a training, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at my website, Dr. B Connections. There's a big button that says book a training with Dr. B. It's that easy. If this show has been beneficial for you, please share it with your friends and family. Spreading the word about the show helps us grow our audience and helps continue to change the world together. Again, thanks so much for listening to Delusional Optimism. Now, go leave a life print.
Thank you for listening to this special episode of Delusional Optimism, brought to you by St. Agnes Medical Center and Every Neighborhood Partnership. We hope you're encouraged by Dr. B's message and find her tips helpful for managing life's stressors and building a more resilient self. For more episodes in this special series, please visit St. Agnes Medical Center's website at www.samc.com. This episode is produced and published by the editing team at Truthwork Media. Truthwork Media is a full-fledged podcasting and social media agency located in South Bend, Indiana, with clients all around the world. For more information, visit them at truthworkmedia.com. These materials and all discussions of these materials are for educational purposes only and do not constitute medical or mental health advice. The presenter is not a licensed mental health or medical service provider. If you need medical or mental health care or advice, you should contact your doctor or therapist, or you can contact your insurance company for a referral. This show and all of its contents are copyright 2020 Dr. B Leave a Life print. Reproduction or use requires written consent of Dr. Kristen Beasley.